David Harmon's weathered hands trembled slightly as he accepted the check, more money than his small farm had seen in decades. Across the table, the quiet woman who'd bought a single carton of eggs from his roadside stand just 1 week ago now offered him a partnership that would put his face on organic egg cartons in stores across America. "I never wanted charity," he whispered. "Just a fair chance." She smiled and slid the contract closer. "This isn't charity, Mr. Harmon. This is business. And your story is exactly what this country needs right now." He didn't know that signing those papers would transform not just his farm, but the entire valley he'd fought so hard to save. Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The morning sun crept reluctantly over Willow Creek Valley, casting long shadows across fields that had seen better days. David Harmon stood on his porch, coffee mug in hand, surveying the small patch of land that had been in his family for 4 generations. At 52, the lines on his face told stories of drought, market crashes, and endless struggles against the corporate farms that had swallowed most of the neighboring properties over the years. He took a sip of coffee, grimacing at the bitterness. He'd been cutting corners wherever possible. Store brand coffee was just one of many small sacrifices. His gaze traveled to the chicken coops where his prized heritage breed hens were already clucking and scratching. Those chickens, at least, were one thing he refused to compromise on. "Morning, ladies," he called as he approached the coos. The hens bobbed and weaved, recognizing the man who fed them each day. Unlike the commercial operations with thousands of birds crammed into warehouse-like buildings, David's 200 hens roamed freely during the day, feeding on insects, grass, and the organic feed supplement he splurged on despite his dwindling bank account. The eggs they produced were exceptional, rich, orange-yolked, with shells so thick you had to put some muscle into cracking them. David Dassa collected them carefully, placing them in recycled cartons. These eggs were his last stand, his final attempt to keep the farm afloat in a world that seemed determined to push small farmers into extinction. His phone buzzed in his pocket. David wiped his hands on his jeans before retrieving it, already knowing what the call would be about. "Mr. Harmon," the voice on the other end was professionally sympathetic. "I'm calling about your mortgage payment." "I know it's late, Ms. Jenkins. I'll have it by the end of the week." He tried to keep the desperation from his voice. "This is the 3rd time in 6 months, Mr. Harmon. The bank is running out of patience." David closed his eyes, leaning against the coop. "The roadside stand is doing better. And I've got a new restaurant interested in my eggs. Just need a little more time." A sigh came through the phone. "1 week, Mr. Harmon. After that, we'll have to discuss foreclosure options." The call ended, and David slipped the phone back into his pocket, his hand shaking slightly. He looked down at the basket of freshly gathered eggs. They were beautiful, perfect even. But being right about farming methods, about animal welfare, about food, quality wasn't paying the bills. After finishing his morning chores, David loaded several dozen cartons of eggs into his ancient pickup truck. The Harmon Family Farms sign he'd attached to the side was faded and peeling, but he couldn't afford to replace it. He'd set up his roadside stand at the intersection of County Road 16 and the Hiawatha spot that, quote, caught both local traffic and the occasional tourist heading to the lake beyond the valley. The wooden stand itself was simple but sturdy, built by David's own hands, from lumber salvaged from an old barn. A hand-painted sign proclaimed, "Farm fresh eggs, heritage breeds pastured," in neat lettering done by his daughter Jenny before she'd left for college 3 years ago. He arranged the egg cartons carefully, placing a chalkboard with today's price beside them. $6 a dozen, more the more. Supermarket eggs, but still not enough to reflect their true cost of production. The first few hours brought the usual trickle of regular customers. Mrs. Abernathy, who swore David's eggs made the best cakes in the county. Jim from the diner, who bought 5 dozen every Tuesday. A handful of retirees who remembered what real eggs tasted like and were willing to pay a premium for the experience. By noon, the sun beat down mercilessly. David sat in a folding chair under the small awning, calculating figures in a worn notebook. Even with every carton sold, he'd still be short on the mortgage payment. He was considering packing up early when a sleek silver car he didn't recognize pulled onto by the gravel shoulder. The woman who emerged was a study in contrasts to the rural setting. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, but her clothes, while casual, had the unmistakable look of quality that David had learned to recognize over years of feeling underdressed at bank meetings. She approached the stand with purpose, her eyes taking in every detail. "Are these really from heritage breed chickens?" she asked without preamble, picking up a carton and examining it. David straightened in his chair. "Yes, ma'am. Got barred Plymouth Rocks, Rhode Island Reds, and Buff Orpingtons. All raised on pasture with plenty of space to forage naturally." She opened the carton, studying the multicolored eggs inside, some brown, some with a blush of blue-green, others speckled. "They're all different. Different breeds lay different colored eggs. They all taste the same, which is to say, nothing like what you get at the supermarket." He couldn't keep a hint of pride from his voice. The woman closed the carton carefully. "I'll take a dozen." As David made change from the cash box, he noticed her looking at the faded farm sign on his truck. "Harmon Family Farms," she read aloud. "How long have you been in business?" "My great-grandfather started this place in 1923, David replied. "Been in the family ever since." Something flickered in her eyes, interest perhaps, or calculation. "And you're still independent? No contracts with distributors?" The question seemed oddly specific for a roadside egg customer, but David was used to curious city folks. "Yes, ma'am. Just me and my chickens. Sell direct to customers and a couple local restaurants." She nodded, accepting her change and the carton of eggs. "Thank you, Mr. Harmon." "David," he corrected automatically. "David," she repeated with a small smile. "I'm Rebecca Chen." She offered no further information about herself, and David, raised with rural politeness, didn't ask. She returned to her car, placed the eggs carefully on the passenger seat, and drove away. David watched the cloud of dust settle behind her car, then turned back to his accounts. Just another customer, he told himself, though something about the encounter had felt different. That evening, David sat at his kitchen table with papers spread before him, the harsh overhead light making the numbers seem even more unforgiving. The farm had been operating at a loss for 3 years running. His savings were depleted, his credit cards maxed out, and the equity loan he'd taken out to repair the barn roof after last year's storm was another monthly payment he struggled to make. He pushed the papers away and walked to the window. Outside, the moon illuminated his land, the old farmhouse where he'd grown up, the barn with its new roof, the chicken coops, and beyond them, fields that had once grown corn and wheat but now lay fallow because he couldn't afford the inputs needed for a proper crop. His phone chimed with a text message. It was from Jenny, his daughter, now in her final year of agricultural business studies at the state university. "How are things, Dad? Need me to come home this weekend?" David's thumb hovered over the screen. Jenny was the smart one, the one who'd seen the writing on the wall years ago. "We need to diversify," she'd argued. "Direct marketing, value-added products, agritourism, that's where small farms are finding success." But implementing her ideas required capital he didn't have. "All good here," he tacked back. "You focus on finals." "Proud of you, kiddo." He set the phone down, knowing she wouldn't believe him, but would respect his pride enough not to push. The truth was, he needed more than a weekend visit. He needed a miracle. 3 days passed. David sold eggs, tended his chickens, and avoided calls from the bank. On the 4th day, as he was setting up his roadside stand, the silver car appeared again, kicking up dust as it pulled off the highway. This time, Rebecca Chen wasn't alone. 2 men in business casual attire emerged from the car with her. "Good morning, David," she called, approaching the stand while her companions surveyed the surroundings. "I was hoping to catch you here." "Morning," he replied cautiously, noting the portfolio one of the men carried. Experience had taught him to be wary of strangers with documents. "Need more eggs?" Rebecca smiled. "Actually, I'd like to talk to you about your eggs. And your farm." She gestured to her companions. "This is Michael Young, my business partner, and James Wilson, our creative director." The men stepped forward, offering handshakes. David accepted them automatically, his mind racing. "Creative director? I realize this is unexpected," Rebecca continued, "but I wonder if we might see your operation, the farm, the chickens. I'd like to understand more about how you do things." Suspicion warred with curiosity in David's mind. "Mind telling me what this is about first?" The three exchanged glances before Rebecca spoke. "I'm the founder of Roots Wings, a new organic food company. We're launching a line of products focused on traditional farming methods and heritage breeds. Your eggs are exactly what we've been looking for." "And AT." David's eyebrows rose. "You starting a food company and you want my eggs? I've only got 200 hens. That's not exactly commercial scale." "We're not looking for commercial scale," Michael interjected. "We're looking for authenticity, quality over quantity. We'd like to feature your story," James added. The fourth-generation farmer maintaining tradition in a world of factory farming. It's powerful. David looked from one face to another, trying to determine if this was some elaborate prank. "My story won't feed many people." Rebecca's expression grew serious. "No, but it might inspire change. Would you show us around?" Something in her directness persuaded him. David closed the roadside stand and led them to his truck. "We can drive up to the farm. It's about a mile down that dirt road." As they bunked along the rutted drive in David's truck, Rebecca and her colleagues in the back seat, he felt a strange mix of embarrassment and pride. The farm had seen better days, peeling paint on the house, equipment that should have been replaced years ago. But the land itself was beautiful, the valley spreading out around them in the morning light. "How many acres do you have?" Michael asked. 87, David replied. "Used to be over 200, but my father had to sell parcels off during the farm crisis in the 80s. Rebecca was making notes on her phone. "And it's all certified organic?" David shook his head. "Can't afford the certification process, but I follow organic practices. No pesticides, no antibiotics for the chickens, unless absolutely necessary for their welfare." They pulled up to the farmhouse, and David led them first to the chicken coops. As if on cue, the hens came running when they saw him, clucking and bustling around his feet. "They know you," James observed, already taking photos with a professional-looking camera. "They should. I'm out here 3 times a day, every day." David grabbed a handful of feed from a nearby bucket, scattering it for the eager birds. "Each one has a personality. That bossy one there is Henrietta. She's the self-appointed queen of the flock." Rebecca knelt down, watching the chickens with genuine interest. "They have so much space. 5 square feet per bird minimum, plus the pasture access during the day. Commercial operations give them less than a square foot each." He couldn't keep the disgust from his voice. They spent the next hour touring the farm, the coops, the processing area where David washed and packed eggs, the old barn where generations of Harmons had stored equipment and hay. Throughout it all, James took photos and videos, while Michael and Rebecca asked detailed questions about David's practices, his challenges, his philosophy of farming. Finally, they settled at the kitchen table, where David somewhat self-consciously offered coffee in mismatched mugs. Rebecca set a sleek laptop before him and pulled up a presentation. "Let me tell you about Roots Wings," she began. "We're building a company that connects consumers with real food and the people who produce it. Not mass market organic, but small batch, artisanal, with complete transparency about sourcing." Slides showed elegant packaging featuring black and white photos of farmers, close-ups of heirloom vegetables, and pastoral landscapes. The aesthetic was simple but sophisticated. "We've secured distribution deals with high-end grocery chains on both coasts, plus a network of independent health food stores across the country," Michael explained. "We're launching with 6 core products: honey, preserves, flour, cheese, butter, and eggs." David's coffee mug paused halfway to his lips. "And you want my eggs for this?" Rebecca closed the laptop, meeting his gaze directly. "Not just your eggs, David. We want you. Your story, your face on the packaging, your name as the supplier. Harmon Family Farms would be our exclusive egg partner." The kitchen fell silent. except for the ticking of the old clock on the wall. David set his mug down carefully. I don't understand. There are organic egg producers with thousands of birds. Why me? Because you're the real thing, Rebecca said simply. You're not doing this because it's trendy or profitable. You're doing it because it's right. That authenticity is what our brand needs. And what would this partnership look like exactly? David asked, caution tempering the hope that threatened to rise in his chest. Michael opened the portfolio he'd been carrying and extracted a document. We'd contract to buy all the eggs your current flock produces at 3 times your current retail price. David blinked. 3 times? Yes. Additionally, we'd provide capital for you to expand more coos, more hens, perhaps even hiring help with the agreement that Roots Wings would have first right to purchase the increased production. We'd also pay a licensing fee for the use of your name and image, James added, plus royalties on each unit sold. We anticipate nationwide distribution within 18 months. The numbers they were suggesting made David's head swim. It was more money than the farm had seen in decades, perhaps ever. What's the catch? He asked bluntly. Rebecca smiled. The catch is that we need absolute consistency and adherence to our quality standards. Regular inspections, complete transparency about your methods, willingness to be the public face of our egg line including occasional appearances at food shows or media interviews. And, Michael added, we'd need you to maintain the character of this place. The authenticity of a family farm is central to our marketing approach. David stood up abruptly, walking to the window. Outside, the chickens pecked contentedly in the yard, oblivious to the fact that their eggs had potentially just become the salvation of the farm. I need time to think, he said finally. And I'd want my daughter to look at any contracts. She's studying ad business. Of course, Rebecca said, standing as well. We'll leave the proposal with you. Take a few days. As they prepared to leave, Rebecca paused at the door. One more thing, David. We don't just want to preserve what you have. We want to help you grow it the right way. If there are improvements you've been wanting to make, equipment you need, even land you'd like to reclaim or purchase, we should discuss it. After they drove away, David sat at his kitchen table for a long time, staring at the proposal they'd left behind. The numbers were almost unbelievable. The advance alone would pay off his mortgage and outstanding debts. The ongoing revenue would allow him to implement many of the improvements Jenny had been advocating for years. But there was something else. Something he was almost afraid to acknowledge. Validation. After years of being told his methods were outdated, inefficient, a quaint relic of a bygone era, here was someone saying not only that he'd been right all along, but that his approach was valuable enough to build a buy. National brand. Around. He reached for his phone and dialed Jenny's number. Dad? Her voice was instantly concerned. He rarely called during the day. Hey kiddo. You sitting down? You're not going to believe what just happened. Over the next week, David and Jenny reviewed the contract with painstaking care. Jenny, applying her business education and innate skepticism, flagged several clauses for renegotiation and insisted on bringing in a lawyer friend who specialized in agricultural contracts. They're offering the fair deal, Dad, but we need to make sure you're protected long-term, she explained, highlighting sections of the document. What happens if they get bought out by a bigger company? What if they want to change your methods later? We need contingencies. David nodded, grateful for her expertise and even more for her use of we. For the first time in years, it felt like the farm had a future that might include his daughter. When Rebecca and her team returned, Jenny was present for the negotiations. David watched with pride as she confidently addressed each concern, her professional demeanor a perfect complement to his practical knowledge of the farm itself. We want to ensure that my father maintains control over the farming practices, Jenny explained. While we understand your need for consistency, the welfare of the chickens and the quality of the eggs are non-negotiable priorities. Rebecca seemed impressed, rather than put off by the counter-proposals. Absolutely. In fact, I'd like to add a clause stating that if we ever request changes that compromise animal welfare or egg quality, David has the right to refuse without penalty. By the end of the day, they had reached an agreement that satisfied both parties. The signing ceremony was simple, just the 5 of them at the kitchen table, with James documenting the moment for what would become part of the brand's origin story. As David's pen hovered over the signature line, he felt the weight of 4 generations on his shoulders. "My great-grandfather would hardly recognize farming today," he mused. "Perhaps," Rebecca said quietly, "but I think he'd recognize integrity when he saw it." David signed the contract. Just like that, Harmon Family Farms became the exclusive egg supplier for Roots Wing's premium heritage egg line. The changes began immediately. Within days, a team arrived to upgrade the processing facility, where David cleaned and packed eggs. State-of-the-art equipment replaced his manual washing system, while still maintaining the careful handling that preserved the egg's natural protective coating. The packaging changed. 2 elegant cartons featuring a black-and-white photo of David with his chickens, the Harmon Family Farms logo prominently displayed alongside the Roots Wings brand. The first shipment of eggs to Roots Wings distribution center was a momentous occasion. David insisted on delivering them personally, driving his truck the 100 miles to ensure they arrived in perfect condition. As workers unloaded the precious cargo, he hovered nervously. "First of many deliveries, Mr. Harmon," the warehouse manager assured him, signing the receipt with a flourish. In the months that followed, David's operation expanded gradually. With Jenny's guidance, they built additional coos, each matching the high standards of the originals. They increased the flock, carefully selecting new heritage breed chickens that would maintain the diversity and quality of their eggs. Most significantly, they hired 3 local workers, all from farming families that had been forced to seek employment elsewhere when their own operations failed. "It feels good to provide jobs," David confessed to Jenny one evening as they watched the sunset from the porch. "Like we're putting something back into the community." Jenny smiled, scrolling through the latest sales figures on her tablet. "Wait until you see this, Dad. The first month of nationwide distribution, and we're already exceeding projections by 20%. David shook his head in wonder. "I still can't believe people in New York and California are eating our eggs. Not just eating them, raving about them. Look at the social media mentions." She handed him the tablet, where a hashtag #HarmonEggs was trending with photos of elaborate brunches and testimonials about the superior taste and quality. Fame came unexpectedly to David. The story of the stubborn farmer who refused to compromise on quality, who nearly lost everything before becoming the face of a national brand, resonated with consumers tired of corporate anonymity in their food supply. Requests for interviews began to pile up. The first major piece appeared in a glossy food magazine, a 6-page spread featuring professional photographs of the farm, the chickens, and David himself, looking somewhat uncomfortable in his best flannel shirt. The article, titled "The Egg Evangelist," painted him as a folk hero of the sustainable agriculture movement. "I'm no evangelist," he protested to Rebecca when she sent him the advance copy. "I'm just a farmer, doing what farmers have done for centuries." "That's exactly why people connect with you," she replied. "You're authentic in a world desperate for something real." The publicity brought unexpected visitors to Willow Creek Valley. Food enthusiasts made pilgrimages to the roadside stand, now rebuilt and expanded as a small farm store selling not only eggs, but also merchandise featuring the Harmon Family Farms logo. Local restaurants that had previously balked at David's prices now clamored to advertise that they served the famous Harmon eggs. Not all the attention was positive. Representatives from large agricultural corporations viewed David's sudden prominence as a threat, an implicit criticism of their own practices. Letters arrived suggesting that his methods were misleading consumers about modern farming necessities. A particularly pointed message came from Consolidated Agricultural Products, the very corporation that had been buying up failing farms throughout the region. "They're worried," Jenny observed, tossing the letter aside. "Your success challenges their narrative that small farms can't survive without selling out." David frowned. "I don't want to be anyone's political statement. I just want to raise good chickens and sell good eggs." "Sometimes doing the right thing becomes political whether you intend it or not," Rebecca pointed out during her monthly visit to the farm. "But we'll protect you from the worst of it. Just keep doing what you do best." 6 months into the partnership, Roots Wings arranged for David to attend an organic food expo in Chicago. It would be his first time leaving the farm for more than a day in over a decade. "I can't just leave," he protested. "Who'll take care of the chickens? That's why you hired staff, remember?" Jenny reminded him gently. "Carlos has been managing the daily operations for months now. He's more than capable. And I'll be here too," she added. Having graduated with honors, Jenny had officially joined the family business, bringing her marketing expertise and business acumen back to the farm that had raised her. Reluctantly, David agreed to go. The Expo was an eye-opening experience. The Roots Wings booth, with its elegant black and white aesthetic, stood out among the colorful displays of organic products. A large photograph of David with his chickens formed the backdrop, with the tagline, "Heritage Breeds, Honored Traditions," emblazoned above it. For 3 days, David met with chefs, food writers, and enthusiastic consumers who lined up to shake his hand and tell him how his eggs had changed their breakfast experience. He demonstrated the proper way to crack an egg with a thick shell, explained the dietary differences that created those deep orange yolks, and patiently answered the same questions dozens of times. Do the different colored eggs taste different? No, but they're beautiful in the carton. Do you really know all your chickens by name? Not all 200, but the particularly distinctive ones, yes. Would you ever sell to a larger company? Not if it meant changing how he treated his birds. By the final day, David was exhausted but exhilarated. He'd connected with other small producers who shared his philosophy: a cheesemaker from Vermont, a fourth-generation beekeeper from Oregon, a family growing heirloom grains in Montana. They exchanged stories, advice, and mutual encouragement. "It's like finding your tribe," Rebecca observed as she watched David deep in conversation with an apple orchardist whose family had been growing forgotten varieties for generations. When David returned to the farm, he brought with him not just orders and connections, but a renewed sense of purpose. The world beyond Willow Creek Valley was paying attention to what happened on his small patch of land. It mattered. The 1-year anniversary of the partnership arrived with an unexpected proposal from Rebecca. She and her team came to the farm for what David assumed would be a routine review meeting, but they brought something more. "We'd like to expand the Harmon line," Rebecca announced, presenting a new set of mock-ups. Not just eggs, but a complete range of poultry products. Heritage breed chicken, bone broth, rendered fat for cooking, all with the same standards you've established for the eggs. David's expression must have shown his hesitation, because she quickly added, "This would require significant expansion, of course. More land, different facilities, additional staff, but we believe the market is there." "You're talking about raising chickens for meat," David said slowly. "That's a different operation entirely." "But with the same principles," Michael interjected. "Pasture-raised, heritage breeds, humane practices throughout. We've run the numbers, and with the premium these products would command, it could be extremely profitable." David looked to Jenny, whose analytical mind he'd come to rely on for business decisions. She was already reviewing the proposal, her brow furrowed in concentration. "The capital investment would be substantial," she noted. "But the projected returns are impressive, and it would allow us to utilize parts of the property that aren't currently productive." "We'd need more land," David mused, thinking of the neighboring parcels that had once been part of the original Harmon farm. Harrison's place has been on the market since he passed last spring. "The old Clayton farm too," Jenny added. "Together, that would give us nearly the original acreage Grandpa had." Rebecca smiled. "Roots Wings would finance the land acquisition as part of our investment in the expanded operation. We see this as the next logical step in our partnership." That evening, after the Roots Wings team had departed, David walked the boundaries of his property in the fading light. The prospect of reclaiming the land his father had been forced to sell decades ago was powerful. Expanding into meat production would be challenging, but it would also create more local jobs and further secure the farm's future. He stopped at the old oak tree that marked the property line, remembering how his father had stood in this very spot the day they signed over the eastern fields to pay off bank loans. Someday, his father had promised, "We'll get it back." David hadn't believed him then. Now, improbably, that promise might be fulfilled. The expansion plan moved forward with characteristic thoroughness. Jenny took the lead on the business side, negotiating the land purchases and working with architects to design facilities that would meet both practical needs and the aesthetic requirements of the brand. David focused on researching heritage meat, bird breeds, and developing management protocols that would maintain their high welfare standards at a larger scale. The first challenge emerged unexpectedly, as news of the expansion spread through the community. A small but vocal group of residents raised concerns about potential environmental impacts. Though David's methods were far more sustainable than conventional agriculture, fears about odor, water quality, and increased truck traffic led to a contentious town hall meeting. David, unaccustomed to public speaking, found himself defending his farming practices before a crowded room at the Willow Creek Community Center. Some faces were supportive longtime customers and fellow farmers who understood his approach. Others were skeptical, influenced by misinformation, or genuine but misplaced concerns. Mr. Harmon claims these will be humane operations, one woman argued. But how can raising animals for slaughter ever be called humane? A murmur ran through the crowd. David gripped the podium, finding his voice. "I respect your viewpoint," he began. "But I believe there's a profound difference between raising animals with respect for their nature and needs, and the industrial model that treats them as mere units of production. Our birds will live as chickens should outdoors, on pasture, expressing their natural behaviors. Yes, their lives will end as food, but until that day, they'll have a good life. That matters." An elderly farmer in the back stood up. "I've known the Harmons for 50 years. If David says he'll do right by those birds in this land, you can take that to the bank." Gradually, through patient explanation and a willingness to address concerns directly, David won over enough of the community to proceed. The planning board approved the necessary permits, with conditions that Jenny assured him they would have implemented anyway. As construction began on the new facilities, another challenge emerged from an unexpected quarter: Consolidated Agricultural Products, which operated a large conventional poultry operation 30 miles away, filed a lawsuit claiming that Harmon Family Farms marketing materials disparaged their products by implying that heritage breeds and pasture-raising methods produced healthier, more ethical chicken. "This is nothing but an intimidation tactic," Jenny fumed as they reviewed the legal documents with the Roots Wings attorneys. "They know their case is weak, but they're hoping we'll back down rather than fight a costly legal battle." "They picked the wrong farmer to intimidate," David said quietly. Rebecca was more pragmatic. "We'll fight it, of course. And we'll use the publicity to highlight exactly why your methods are superior. Sometimes, your enemies do your marketing for you." The lawsuit dragged on for months, drawing media attention that ultimately benefited Harmon Family Farms. Food writers, environmental journalists, and agricultural policy experts weighed in, most supporting David's approach. A crowdfunding campaign launched by customers to help with legal fees raised triple its goal within a week. In the midst of these challenges, a personal milestone brought perspective. David's 60th birthday arrived, and for the first time in years, he felt like celebrating. Jenny organized a party at the farm, inviting friends, neighbors, and the growing Harmon Family Farms team. As twilight fell, lanterns illuminated the yard where tables had been set with simple but elegant farm-to-table fare. The Roots Wings founders had flown in for the Timonin occasion, bringing with them chefs who had become devoted customers. Even some of the skeptical neighbors came, won over by David's principled stand and the economic benefits the expanding operation was bringing to the Sella community. After dinner, Rebecca tapped her glass for attention. 8 years ago, I left a career in corporate food marketing because I could no longer participate in a system I knew was broken, she began. I had a vision for something different, a company that would honor the people who grow our food with integrity. But it was just a concept until I found a carton of extraordinary eggs at a roadside stand. She raised her glass to David. You weren't just selling eggs that day. You were demonstrating that doing things the right way matters, especially when it's difficult. You've taught me, and now thousands of customers across the country, that good food begins with good values. David, uncomfortable with praise, nodded his thanks. When it was his turn to speak, he kept it brief. My father used to say that a good farmer leaves the land better than he found it. For a long time, I thought I'd failed him. Now I know that legacy isn't just about the land. It's about the principles you pass on. He looked at Jenny, at the team they'd built, at the community gathered around him. Thank you for helping me build something worth passing along. Later that night, after the guests had departed, David sat on the porch with Rebecca. Above them, stars filled the clear country sky. Did you ever imagine this? He asked. When you bought that first carton of eggs? She smiled. I hoped, but I didn't dare assume you'd say yes. You struck me as a proud man, not someone looking for a corporate partner. I was skeptical, David admitted. Thought you might try to change how I did things, turn it into something less authentic. That would have defeated the purpose, Rebecca said. The whole point was to scale what you were already doing right, not to change it. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before she spoke again. We're getting acquisition offers, you know. Larger food companies wanting to buy root swings. David tensed. And we're saying no, for the same reason you didn't sell out when times were tough. Some things matter more than money. The lawsuit was eventually dismissed, with the judge ruling that Harmon Family Farms' marketing claims were based on factual differences in production methods rather than disparagement. The victory celebration coincided with another milestone, the completion of the new processing facility for the meat bird operation. The building was a testament to the partnership's values, designed to minimize stress for the birds and maximize efficiency for the workers. It incorporated solar panels, rainwater collection systems, and state-of-the-art temperature controls. Most importantly to David, it allowed for humane handling throughout the process. The first flock of meat birds, a carefully selected mix of heritage breeds, known for their flavor and foraging abilities, arrived as die-old chicks that spring. David spent hours in the brooder building, watching over them with the same attention he'd given his laying hens all these years. They're beautiful, Jenny observed, joining him one evening as he checked the temperature and water supplies. The chicks, already showing the distinctive coloration of their breeds, pecked and chirped energetically around the spacious, brightly lit space. They'll be even more beautiful on pasture, David replied. 2 more weeks and they'll be ready for the outdoor pens. When the time came to move the growing birds outside, David insisted on being present for the entire process. The movable pasture shelters designed with Jenny's input to protect the birds from predators, while allowing full access to fresh grass were positioned across fields that had once grown corn. Now they supported a complex ecosystem of grasses, insects, and birds working in natural harmony. This is how it should be, David explained to a group of culinary students who had come to tour the farm as part of their farm-tutable curriculum. The chickens eat insects and fertilize the soil. We move the shelters daily so they always have fresh pasture. No antibiotics needed because they're not stressed or overcrowded. The students took photos and notes, many expressing amazement at the difference between Harmon's operation and the industrial facilities they'd seen in documentaries. But isn't this inefficient? One asked. You could raise many more birds in a confined space. Depends how you define efficiency, David countered. If it's just birds per square foot, sure. But if you're measuring nutrition per acre, animal welfare, environmental impact, worker satisfaction by those metrics, this system wins hands down. The expansion of Harmon Family Farms continued steadily over the next 2 years. The meat bird operation proved as successful as the eggs, with restaurants and specialty butchers willing to pay premium prices for chicken that tasted the way chicken used to taste. The bone broth, rendered fat, and other secondary products found their own dedicated following. As the business grew, so did its impact on the surrounding community. The original 3 employees had grown to 27, a significant employer in a rural area where jobs had been scarce. The farm purchased feed ingredients from neighboring organic grain producers, creating a market that allowed more farmers to transition away from chemical-intensive agriculture. When Willow Creek's struggling general store announced it would close, Jenny approached Rebecca with a proposal. We should buy it and convert it into a proper farm store. Not just our products, but a showcase for all the sustainable producers in the region. The Harmon Heritage Market opened 6 months later in the renovated general store building. It featured a butcher counter, fresh produce section, dairy case, and prepared foods department, all stocked with products from farms within a 50-mile radius. A cafe served simple meals highlighting seasonal ingredients, while the community bulletin board connected local producers with customers. The market became a gathering place, hosting workshops on everything from chicken keeping to fermentation, cooking classes using heritage ingredients, and community events that strengthened the social fabric of Willow Creek Valley. Tourism increased as food enthusiasts made pilgrimages to the source of products they'd come to love. Not everyone celebrated this transformation. Industrial agricultural interests viewed the growing success of Harmon family farms and similar operations as a threat to their model. Trade groups lobbied for regulations that would disadvantage small producers, while marketing campaigns attempted to convince consumers that heritage breeds and traditional methods were merely nostalgic luxuries, rather than viable alternatives. "They're getting nervous," Rebecca observed during a strategy meeting at the farm. "Your success challenges the narrative that their methods are the only way to feed people affordably." David, who had once avoided politics entirely, found himself reluctantly drawn into advocacy. When a proposed state bill threatened to impose one-size-fits-all regulations that would have disproportionately burdened small producers, he testified before the legislative committee. "I'm not here to tell anyone how to farm," he began, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "I'm here to ask for the freedom to farm in a way that respects the land, the animals, and the people who work it. Our methods aren't a step backward, they're a step forward, combining traditional wisdom with modern knowledge." The bill was defeated, and David found himself being approached by other farmers seeking advice on transitioning to more sustainable methods. What began as informal conversations evolved into a structured mentorship program. Harmon Family Farms began hosting weekend workshops for farmers interested in pastured poultry production, with David and his team sharing their hard-won knowledge. "You've become a teacher," Jenny remarked one evening, as they watched a group of workshop participants depart, their trucks filled with notes and newfound determination. David shrugged, embarrassed by the observation. "Just sharing what works for us. That's what teaching is, Dad, and it might be your most important legacy." Legacy was increasingly on David's mind as he approached his 65th birthday. Though he remained active in farm operations, he had gradually ceded day-to-day management to Jenny and the capable team they'd assembled. Carlos, his first hire, now served as operations manager for the entire egg production. The meat bird program was overseen by Sophia Williams, a young veterinarian who had joined them after becoming disillusioned with industrial livestock production. As his role evolved, David found himself with time to pursue a long-deferred dream. With Jenny's encouragement, he converted one of the older outbuildings into a workshop where he began crafting furniture from locally harvested wood. His pieces, like his farming, emphasized quality materials and traditional methods. Word spread, and soon he had a waiting list for his simple but elegant chairs, tables, and benches. "You know," Rebecca teased during one of her visits, "we could launch a Harmon Heritage Furniture line." "Don't even think about it," David warned, though the idea wasn't entirely unappealing. There was something satisfying about creating objects that would outlast him, that would carry something of his values into the future. The 5th anniversary of the partnership called for celebration. Roots Wings had grown into a nationally recognized brand, with Harmon Family Farms its flagship supplier. The company now worked with dozens of small producers across the country, each bringing their own story and commitment to quality. The celebration, held at the farm, brought together the extended family that had formed around the venture: employees, local suppliers, chefs who championed their products, journalists who had documented their journey, and neighbors who had become friends. Tables set up in the largest pasture featured dishes created from Harmon products by renowned chefs who had flown in for the occasion. As the sun set, casting golden light across the land that 4 generations of Harmons had stewarded, David found himself seated beside Rebecca. They had come a long way from that first encounter at his roadside egg stand. "Did you know it would work out like this?" he asked her, gesturing at the thriving farm around them. She smiled. "I hoped. But it was never just about business for me. It was about proving a point that doing things right can also be doing things successfully." It's been successful beyond anything I imagined, David admitted. Though sometimes I wonder what happens when I'm gone. Will it all continue the way we've built it? Look at Jenny, Rebecca said, nodding toward where his daughter stood deep in conversation with a group of young farmers. She's not just carrying on your work, she's expanding it, improving it. That's how tradition stays alive, not by freezing it in time, but by allowing it to evolve while holding true to its core principles. David nodded, watching his daughter with pride. Jenny had indeed taken what he'd started and made it stronger. Under her leadership, Harmon Family Farms had become not just a business, but a beacon, showing what was possible when values drove decisions rather than expedience or profit alone. Later that evening, as guests departed and the farm settled back into its rhythms, David walked to the highest point on his Proportia gentle rise that offered a view of the entire valley. The moon-illuminated fields that were healthier now than when he'd inherited them, pastures alive with diverse plants and insects, buildings that housed contented animals and fair-paid workers. He thought of his great-grandfather, who had first broken this ground with little more than determination and a pair of mules. What would he make of the farm today? The technology and scale would be unrecognizable, but the underlying ethos of respect for the land, the animals, and the people who worked it would be familiar. That continuity gave David comfort. Farming methods might change, markets certainly would, but the core values could persist across generations if they were nurtured as carefully as the soil itself. In the distance, lights still glowed in the windows of the farmhouse, where Jenny now lived with her own family. Her son, David's grandson, was showing a keen interest in the chickens at just 6 years old. The fifth generation of Harmons was already learning to gather eggs, to observe the birds, to understand the rhythms of the farm. David smiled at the thought. He had almost lost this place and come within days of foreclosure. Now it was secure not just for his lifetime but beyond, carrying forward a tradition of stewardship that had nearly been broken. All because a woman with a vision had stopped at his roadside stand and recognized something valuable in a carton of eggs. The success of Harmon Family Farms sparked a renaissance in Willow Creek Valley. Inspired by David's example, other farmers began transitioning to sustainable methods, finding their own niches in the growing market for authentic food. An old dairy farm converted to making artisanal cheese. A former commodity crop operation diversified into heirloom vegetables. A young couple started a heritage grain bakery using wheat grown within, 20 miles. The regional food system that emerged was resilient in ways that industrial agriculture could never be. When drought struck, the diversified farms with their healthy soils weathered it better than monoculture operations. When market prices fluctuated, direct relationships with customers provided stability. When a poultry disease swept through conventional facilities, Harmon's birds with their stronger immune systems and lower stress levels remained healthy. 7 years into the partnership with Roots Wings, an unexpected opportunity arose. The largest remaining conventional farm in the valley, a 1,000-acre operation owned by an investment group based in Chicago, came up for sale. Its soil depleted by years of chemical-intensive farming, its buildings in disrepair, it represented both a challenge and an opportunity. "We should buy it," Jenny proposed during a family dinner. "Not to operate it ourselves, but to transition it back to sustainable agriculture. We could subdivide it into viable parcels for young farmers who can't afford land otherwise." David raised his eyebrows. "That's a multi-million-dollar proposition, Jenny." "I know, but Roots Wings has created a foundation for exactly this purpose, helping establish the next generation of sustainable farmers. This could be their pilot project." Rebecca and her team were enthusiastic about the concept when Jenny presented it. Together, they developed a plan for what would become the Willow Creek Agricultural Trust. The foundation would purchase the land, restore its soil health through cover cropping and rotational grazing, renovate the infrastructure, and then lease parcels to carefully selected beginning farmers at affordable rates. The leases would include commitments to organic practices, soil building, and community participation, Jenny explained to the local planning board. After 5 successful years, lessees would have the option to purchase their parcels at below-market rates, with conservation easements ensuring the land remains in sustainable agriculture permanently. The project garnered national attention as a model for addressing two critical challenges: the aging farmer population and the difficulty young people faced in accessing agricultural land. Applications flooded in from across the country, aspiring farmers with training and passion, but without the capital needed to start conventional operations. David found himself serving on the selection committee, reviewing business plans and interviewing candidates. The experience gave him renewed hope for the future of farming. These young people, many with agricultural degrees and internships on sustainable farms, were approaching agriculture with a combination of idealism and practical knowledge that impressed him. "They know more starting out than I knew after 20 years of farming," he confessed to Jenny after a particularly inspiring interview with a young couple planning an integrated livestock and vegetable operation. "That's because of people like you, Dad. You've helped make this knowledge accessible." The first cohort of 6 farm families moved onto the trust land the following spring. Each brought specialized skills and distinct visions, from a seed-saving operation focused on drought-resistant varieties to a fiber farm raising heritage sheep and alpacas. Together, they formed a collaborative community, sharing equipment, knowledge, and labor while maintaining their individual enterprises. David found himself spending more and more time mentoring these beginning farmers, sharing his practical experience to complement their theoretical knowledge. In their enthusiasm and commitment, he saw echoes of his younger self, but with advantages he had never had: support, community, and access to markets that valued quality over quantity. As Harmon Family Farms approached its centennial year, plans began for a celebration that would honor the past while looking toward the future. The event would coincide with the 10th anniversary of the partnership with Roots Wings, which had grown into a national success story studied in business schools as a model of values-based enterprise. "We should document this properly," Rebecca suggested during the planning discussions. "Not just the celebration, but the whole journey. People need to understand how close this farm came to being lost and what its survival means." The documentary film crew arrived in early spring, capturing the farm through a full growing season. They interviewed David extensively, drawing out stories of the lean years, the nearly missed mortgage payments, the long hours, and sacrificed vacations that had kept the operation afloat until Rebecca's fortuitous egg purchase. "Did you ever consider giving up?" the director asked during one session. David was silent for a long moment before answering. "There were times I thought I would lose the farm, yes. But giving up? Abandoning the methods my father taught me? Taking shortcuts that would compromise the welfare of the animals or the health of the land? No, that was never an option." The finished film, titled "The Egg That Saved a Farm," premiered at the centennial celebration. Hundreds gathered in the largest pasture, where a screen had been erected against the backdrop of the historic barn. As darkness fell and the film began, David watched his own story unfold: the struggles, the near defeat, the unexpected partnership that had changed everything. The most powerful moments were the before and after sequences. The weathered farmhouse with peeling paint contrasted with its restored glory, the fallow fields now vibrant with diverse plantings, the single roadside egg stand compared with the thriving Harmon Heritage Market. Most striking were the aerial shots showing how the farm had expanded to reclaim land that had been sold off decades earlier, the property lines once again matching the boundaries his great-grandfather had established. After the screening, as applause died down, David was called to speak. He had never been comfortable with public speaking, but on this night, surrounded by 4 generations of his family, his team, and a community that had grown around the values he'd held fast to, he found the words. 100 years ago, my great-grandfather chose this valley because he saw its potential: good soil, clean water, a place where a family could build something lasting. He couldn't have imagined the challenges his descendants would face, or the technologies we'd use, or the markets we'd reach. But I think he would recognize the principles that Tenrai have guided us." David gestured to the young farmers from the Agricultural Trust, seated together near the front. "The next 100 years will bring changes we can't predict, but if we remember that good farming begins with respect for the land, for the animals, for the people who work it, and the people who eat its bounty, then whatever form agriculture takes, It will nourish more than just bodies. It will nourish communities, traditions, and the land itself. As he returned to his seat, David caught Rebecca's eye. She smiled and nodded slightly, acknowledging what they both knew, that the partnership that had begun with a carton of eggs had grown into something neither of them could have imagined, something that would outlast them both. In the years that followed, David gradually stepped back from daily farm operations, though he remained a presence on the property. His workshop expanded as his furniture gained recognition for its craftsmanship and use of sustainable local woods. He took particular satisfaction in crafting pieces for the young farm families, building tables around which their children would gather for generations to come. Jenny assumed full leadership of Harmon Family Farms, bringing her own vision while maintaining the core values her father had instilled. Under her guidance, the operation continued to evolve, adding educational programs for schools, expanding research partnerships with agricultural universities, developing new products that utilized every part of their animals in keeping with their zero-waste philosophy. The relationship with Roots Wings evolved as well. What had begun as a supplier arrangement grew into a true partnership, with Harmon Family Farms taking an ownership stake in the company and helping guide its growth. Together, they expanded their model to other regions, identifying family farms, maintaining traditional practices, and helping them scale without compromising their values. On David's 70th birthday, the governor visited the farm to present him with the state's highest agricultural honor, recognizing his contributions to sustainable farming practices. The ceremony, held in the same pasture where he'd once worried about paying the mortgage, drew hundreds of supporters, including farmers who had adopted his methods, chefs who had championed his products, and customers who had come to see the source of food they trusted. "This recognition doesn't belong to me alone," David insisted in his brief acceptance speech. "It belongs to my family, who kept this farm going through hard times, to my team, who bring their own dedication and innovation every day, to partners like Rebecca Chen, who saw value in what we were doing when others didn't, and to every customer who chose to spend a little more for eggs, produced with integrity." End quote. As he surveyed the gathering, David reflected on the journey that had brought them all to this moment. From the brink of foreclosure to becoming a model that others studied and emulated. From isolation to community. From barely surviving to thriving. All because a woman had stopped at his roadside stand one summer morning, looking for eggs that tasted the way eggs used to taste. Rebecca joined him as the formal ceremony concluded, and guests mingled across the farm. "Quite a change from that first meeting," she observed, handing him a glass of cider from the Trust's new orchard. David nodded, taking in the scene: children playing near the chicken coops, visitors touring the processing facilities, young farmers deep in conversation about cover crop mixes and breed selection. "I never wanted to be a revolutionary," he said. "I just wanted to farm the right way. Sometimes that's revolutionary enough." Rebecca smiled. "And now look, what seemed radical a decade ago is becoming standard practice. You've helped shift the entire conversation about what good farming means." As the sun set over Willow Creek Valley, casting long shadows across fields that had sustained his family for a century, David felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The farm would continue beyond his lifetime, carrying forward values that connected past and future. The work he had done, not just raising chickens, but demonstrating an alternative to industrial agriculture, had meaning that extended far beyond his fence lines. He thought of the countless meals his eggs and chickens had provided, the tables where families gathered to share food produced with care and integrity. He thought of the young farmers now establishing their own operations with his guidance, the workers earning fair wages in decent conditions, the land healing and becoming more fertile under thoughtful stewardship. This was success measured not in dollars alone, but in relationships, in resilience, in regeneration. It was a legacy worth building, worth fighting for, worth passing on. As twilight deepened into night and celebration gave way to quiet conversation, David walked with his grandson to check on the chickens one last time before bed. The boy, now 10, knew the routine by heart, making sure water containers were full, feed was secure from nocturnal visitors, gates were properly latched. "Do you think I'll be a farmer someday, Grandpa?" the boy asked as they walked back toward the house, stars emerging above them. David placed a hand on his shoulder. "That's for you to decide when you're older." But whatever you choose, remember that how you do things matters as much as what you do. There are always shortcuts, always easier ways. The challenge is finding the better way, even when it's harder. The boy nodded solemnly, absorbing the lesson as they continued toward the warmly lit farmhouse. Inside, family and close friends lingered over dessert, their conversation and laughter spilling out into the night. This too was part of what David had built, not just a business, but a place where people connected, where tradition breathed and evolved, where the simple act of sharing food became something sacred. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new decisions to make. The work of farming never ended. Each season brought its own demands and rewards. But tonight, in this moment, David allowed himself to recognize just how far they had come from those desperate days when the bank had threatened foreclosure and the future had seemed impossibly dark. One woman, one carton of eggs, one chance encounter at a roadside stand, and everything had changed. Not by magic or luck alone, but because he had stayed true to his principles even when they seemed to make no economic sense. Because he had done the right thing, day after day, year after year, until someone recognized the value in that commitment and helped him transform it from a struggling operation into a thriving enterprise that nourished far more than it took. As David joined his family at the table, accepting a slice of cake baked with eggs from his own hens and flour from the trust's grain fields, he knew that the real success was not measured in awards or accolades, or even in the financial security they now enjoyed. It was measured in the health of the soil, the contentment of the animals, the strength of the community, and the knowledge that the work would continue long after he was gone. In the end, that was all any farmer could ask for: to leave the land better than he found it, and to pass along not just property, but purpose to those who would follow. David Harmon had done that, against all odds, one egg at a time. And so the story of Harmon Family Farms continued to unfold, rooted in tradition yet branching toward the future. A testament to the power of doing things right, even when doing them right is hard. A reminder that sometimes the most revolutionary act is simply refusing to compromise on what matters most.